Alright, now I've got another NPC upgrade build for you today, and today we're looking at V.VII Swinburne's Guidance AC. Now, before going any further, I just want to mention that if the intro and the internal section of the video seem a little rushed, that's because they are. I actually realized after finishing the original version of the video that Swinburne's build, as I've got it, doesn't need any energy firearm specialization, and I was using an arquebus generator, the VE20C to be exact. And I realized that was really stupid, right? So I had to go back, do some testing, pick out a new generator, get some new gameplay footage, stuff like that. So things are a little rushed at the moment. Now, what are the main issues with his build? Well, obviously, other than the big elephant in the room, the stun baton, there is, of course, his internals just not being very good, right? But the stun baton is the main thing, and it's a pretty easy switch. You just push it out for the laser dagger. The laser dagger is kind of, in many ways, an extremely similar weapon, but it's just simply much better, right? Now, I do think this stun baton is perhaps a little underrated. It can actually do surprisingly decent direct damage, but again, the laser dagger's just the same weapon, but better, really. Now, since we are using the laser dagger on this build, this does give us the opportunity to make fantastic use of the Kakaku boosters, so it's a bit of a change in playstyle in the build to some extent, I guess, but also not really. The main purpose of the Kakaku boosters here is just to simply allow you to chase fast opponents, so that, you know, like, really fast opponents just can't, like, assault boost away from you, right? And that's the main purpose of the Kakaku boosters here in this build, and it does make the build feel quite a bit better, especially against anything this fast. You can definitely keep up with them thanks to the just insane mobility of laser dagger melee boosting, right? And that's part of the big reason I ended up going for the Santai generator, is because you have so much energy, you can be incredibly aggressive, right? Now, the build does have relatively poor energy efficiency, but the shield makes up for that, because while your energy is regenerating, you just put your shield up, right? So it doesn't actually matter. But I will say this build actually feels pretty solid now. It really only took a few small tweaks, and this build actually feels really good. It's a pretty solid build all around. Not really too much to complain about it anymore, in my opinion. Now, getting to the details. Now, getting to the weapons, obviously we've got some changes here, but there's actually a change that I didn't make that I want to talk about as well. But let's get into hand weapons first. First, we've got the Pulse missile launcher, which I switched from the original handheld missile launcher, the P19 MLT. And I just want to say, I don't think this is necessarily an upgrade, a side grade at most, unless you're fighting against an opponent using a pulse shield, of course. The main reason I made this switch is I just wanted to use the new weapon, to be frank. And it just so happens this is a Schneider, therefore an arquebus weapon, and Swinburne is obviously a Vesper, right? So it's kind of fitting in theme in that regard. And again, I just wanted to use a new weapon. That's really about it. Now, moving on, we've got the laser dagger, switch from the original stun baton. I don't think anyone's surprised about this, right? Obviously, I'm sure most people are aware that the stun baton is not a particularly good weapon. I do think it's maybe a little underrated, actually. You can do a surprising amount of damage on direct hits with it. But at the same time, the laser dagger is basically the exact same weapon, but better. So, you know, really not much to compare there when it is basically just the same weapon, but better, to be frank. I mean, obviously, you could do some shenanigans with the charge attack with this, but it's such precise timing, and it's so difficult to pull off that it's not really worth actually considering, right? The laser dagger is just straight up a better version. And moving on, we've got the earshot grenade cannon, and this is actually the weapon I considered switching, but didn't actually switch. And I did consider switching it to the new laser cannon, the VE60 LCB, the new sniper laser cannon, basically. And the main reason I didn't make this change was, quite frankly, I found that the impact output of the earshot was just really vital for this build. Without it, this build doesn't have a great way to generate any stagger damage. So this just felt absolutely terrible to play with on this build, to be frank. So I just stuck with the earshot. You know, the earshot's a pretty solid weapon all around. It got a reload time buff quite a while back, and it's a pretty solid weapon. Obviously, it's not like the most difficult thing in the world for your opponent to dodge, but, you know, if you're kind of paying careful attention to your opponent, you can definitely find some openings to land this, right? Now, moving on, we've got the pulse shield, and I didn't switch his pulse shield to anything else. If I was going to switch it, it would be to the SUR8. And the main reason I ended up didn't switching this is kind of a couple things, just of this having a longer instant guard duration, and this having a longer cooling time, right, are the main reason. And, like, this is definitely better from an idling perspective, right? It's got better idling stats from damage mitigating, impact damaging, but the instant guard stats are quite a bit worse, especially obviously in the instant guard duration being the big one there, right? I just found overall I like this shield more than this shield. And that's really about it. There's not anything much deeper than that. I just feel like this shield just feels better to play with, in my opinion. And yeah, that's all there is to say about the weapons. Let's move on into the frame. Now, obviously, I haven't made any changes to the frame, so this section is really just going to be about why I didn't make any changes. And just to summarize, for the head, the core, and the arms, basically, these are all just pretty solid parts, and there was no reason to switch these out, really. They're all good. There's no, like, replacement that's obviously, like, super superior, so there was just no reason to change them. Now, the legs I want to talk about a bit more in depth, and obviously the main thing to consider here would be switching to the Lammergeier legs, which would offer vastly superior hover speed, right? Now, obviously, this builds a bit on the heavier side for the Lammergeier legs, but obviously we could switch the other frame parts to accommodate for this. But the main reason I actually didn't make this switch is because I am running the Kakaku boosters on this build, the melee boosting boosters, right? So quite frankly, the hover speed on this, while is nice, it's just simply not necessary for this build because we've got laser dagger melee boosting and we have phenomenal mobility thanks to that. And like the hover speed on this legs isn't terrible. It's like 309, I think, on this build. So, you know, the hover speed isn't horrible. It's not amazing either. The boost speed is obviously quite bad. But again, you're relying on the hover speed and the melee boosting as your primary mobility on this build, right? And yeah, that's really all there is to say about the frame. Again, all these parts are just pretty solid. Like, you know, decent melee spec here, which is all we care about. This is a really solid core around. For its weight and energy load, it's got pretty decent defensive stats. And, you know, the VP44D has great attitude stability and decent defenses. So, you know, nothing to complain about really with any of these three parts. Now, let's move on into the internals. All right, now getting the internals. First, I just say there's been a last minute change here because I just totally forgot that I don't need the energy firearm spec on this build, to be honest. So there's been a last minute change to the generator here. Obviously, I had on the VE20C, but I have switched to the Santai. And I kind of came down to two choices between either the Hokushi or the Santai. And the main reason I went for the Santai over the Hokushi is just simply the really, really big energy bar. Lets you be very, very aggressive with your energy meter usage. And since we've got a shield, the like worse energy supply efficiency doesn't matter as much because you can just put the shield up and regenerate your energy relatively safely, right? So it's not as big of a disadvantage as it normally is. And again, in exchange, you get to be very, very aggressive with your melee boosting because we are using the Kakaku boosters on this build to complement the laser dagger. Of course, the insane mobility that you get from melee canceling is just too good to pass up if we're already using the laser dagger. There was no way I was not going to use the Kakaku booster on this build, in my opinion. And originally it does on the Flugel, which I wouldn't use anyways. If this build didn't have like the laser dagger, for example, I would definitely use something like the Wurzel, which just has, of course, the insanely high assault boost thrust that it has to actually make the build decently mobile, right? But again, that's not necessary because we have the Kakaku boosters. And the roll time on this is pretty bad, but again, we have the shield to make up for that. You know, it works out quite well. The shield does here. It kind of makes up for the deficiencies of having such a heavy build with the Kakaku boosters. And again, with the melee boosting, nothing is really going to outrun you, right? And especially with how much energy you have to spend doing it, you're going to be able to catch anything you need to catch with this build, right? Now, for the expansion, pulse armor is what he has on originally. No reason to change this. Just left it alone. Oh, I almost forgot about the FCS. He has on the P10 SLT originally, and to be honest, the FCS kind of doesn't really matter that much here. Part of the reason I left the P10 SLT is because it's really low energy load. It's got decent assist stats, I guess, and you know, the missile lock correction. The pulse missile launchers have such a low lock-on time already that honestly it doesn't really matter that much. But it is nice to have such high lock-on correction anyway, right? And yeah, now that's it for the internals. I'm sorry this last bit probably seems quite a bit rushed. That's because it is. Again, this was a really last-minute change. But as always, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll catch you in the next one. As always, before we get to the gameplay footage, a quick thank you to our members. Any tier of the membership helps a lot. Your support really means a lot to me, and you do get some benefits for doing so. You get like a private Discord channel in the Discord. You get your name here, of course. You get to see videos a day early if you do the $10 tier or higher. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Let's get into the gameplay footage.
Wait, no, please!
Confirmed. Target destroyed.
transmission. I'll support you. This isn't right. You're just a Gen 4. You belong in a museum, not an AC. You don't know when to quit. Just like all the other Ravens. This pilot's no Raven. Don't let the call sign mislead you.
What other Ravens?
I hope you die! Chartreuse! Withdraw! Abandon your AC!
AC envelopes destroyed.
AP at 50%. Repair kits remaining.
Wait. Picking up another AC.
Momentum human. You're strong. Worthy of your name.
AC Aster Crown destroyed.
Thank you, King. We've lost both of them.
One AC left, Raven.
Light shoulder ammunition at 15%.
Watch this one. See where they go on a Raven's wings.
All enemy ACs destroyed. Mission accomplished.